Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 14th of January. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast right here on Arirang TV. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. South Korea and the United States are holding a two-day joint naval drill. It's the first military exercise since Pyongyang said it would halt nuclear testing and be more open for talks if the allies stopped holding such drills. The US plans to sever North Korea's remaining links to international finance after the Sony Pictures hack. A Treasury official says Washington is going to identify the institutions that allow Pyongyang access to the global system. Plus, following the Paris terror attacks, the French Prime Minister says France is at war with extremism and terrorism, not with Islam. Muslim groups are worried the next Charlie Hebdo cover featuring the Prophet Muhammad could incite more violence. Our top story this morning, South Korea and the United States are on to day two of their two-day joint naval drill on this Wednesday. The allies moved ahead despite North Korea saying it will return to talks if such military exercises were cancelled. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Two U.S. Aegis destroyers, including the 9,200-ton USS Mustin, are currently in the East Sea for a joint training with South Korea's 3,200-ton Aegis destroyer, Kwangae-to the Great. This is their first military training since North Korea called for a stop to the joint military exercises, as one of the conditions for the two Koreas to engage in dialogue. Seoul and Washington say their drills are defensive in nature, but North Korea is not convinced. Pyongyang characterizes the drills as a rehearsal for a northward invasion. And instead of responding to South Korea's calls on numerous occasions to come to the negotiating table, North Korea continues with its nuclear threats. The regime's state-run newspaper Rodong Sinmun said on Tuesday that Pyongyang is pursuing nuclear and economic development at the same time, and went on to say the regime will follow its military-first policy to the very end, while continuing to develop its nuclear capabilities. With Seoul and Washington not budging from the joint military drills, and vowing to go ahead with the large-scale joint training set for March, eyes turn to how that's going to affect the prospects of inter-Korean dialogue. As for the latest, South Korean President Park Geun-hye reached out to North Korea once again on Monday in her New Year's press conference, offering talks with no preconditions. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The United States is moving to seal North Korea off from the international financial system as it looks to starve the leadership in Pyongyang of cold, hard cash. The latest development comes after President Obama launched new sanctions against the regime for its alleged hacking of a movie studio. Shin Se-min reports.
The U.S. is targeting the remaining financial links North Korea has to the international financial system as retaliation for Pyongyang's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures late last year. Speaking before members of Congress Tuesday, Daniel Glazer, Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing at the U.S. Treasury, said past sanctions had already crippled hundreds of overseas banks from doing business with the North, but said the U.S. could go further.
So we could target any North Korean government agency, we could target any North Korean government official, and then once so targeted, we could apply sanctions with respect to any individual or entity who's providing them in turn material support, or any individual entity that they in turn control.
Glazer said the U.S. is targeting the North Korean elite's source of hard currency and its ability to send back cash through Chinese commercial banks to increase the cost for North Korea. And Sung Kim, the top U.S. official on North Korea, who was also at the briefing, said that Pyongyang is losing friends, even its longtime ally, China.
I think what we have seen in our cooperation with China is that China is working with us more effectively and trying to stifle North Korea's dangerous activities. And it's an ongoing effort. I think all of us need to do more, including China.
Responding to critics who say the sanctions don't go far enough, Kim said the latest measures are very strong as they'll allow Washington to target anyone that tries to provide material support to the North. Despite the strong words, the U.S. official added that Washington remains open to holding talks with North Korea on the nuclear weapons program. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
US President Barack Obama is said to be preparing a plan to boost cybersecurity amid major hack attacks against companies like Sony Pictures. Now, cybersecurity has jumped to the top of his agenda, and the White House is said to have already discussed the issue with leaders of the Republican-led Congress, where related bills will be debated and potentially passed. Among those under consideration are offering liability protection to companies that quickly share information about cyber attacks, and also new powers for law enforcement to investigate and prosecute cybercrime. One of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's closest aides is urging Korea not to attach any preconditions to a possible bilateral summit between the two countries. Abe's chief cabinet secretary Yoshihide Suga said on Tuesday that the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II should not stand in the way of a potential summit. His remarks came a day after President Park Geun-hye told reporters that she was open to holding a summit with Abe. President Park added, however, that in order for a summit to be productive, the sex slavery issue must first be addressed. Speaking on the issue on Tuesday, Suga said Japan maintains its stance that it should not be made into a political and diplomatic issue. And President Park Geun-hye gathered together the nation's top economic-related ministers and agency heads on Tuesday. She wanted to hear about how they plan to strengthen Korea's economic fundamentals. Lee Ji-yoon has more.
Opening a joint briefing to the president by 6 economy-related ministries and agencies, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan stressed the importance of overhauling the public sector as the first step in revitalizing the Korean economy, stressing that 2015 is the golden time for structural reforms and innovation. Top economic policymakers laid out plans for strengthening the nation's economic fundamentals and balancing domestic demand and exports. The government plans to focus on reforms in the 4 sectors of labor, finance, the public sector, and education this year. The government said its efforts last year set the stage for implementing the president's 3-year economic reform plan, with its agencies reducing their debt by $22 billion to surpass the initial goal by about $4 billion. Seoul will keep reducing government debt, restructure pension schemes for civil servants, and push forward with other public sector overhauls in the hope of leading reforms in other sectors. For example, the Labor Ministry will promote salaries based on their performance, not seniority. The government will also devise safety net measures for temporary workers to improve working conditions. To better cater to investors in the financial sector, the government will facilitate venture capital projects and prepare an implementation plan for the second phase of reforms. University, for their parts, will now be focused on providing more practical education, and designated colleges will now have to match their student quotas with market demand so that students can get hired upon graduation. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, labour market conditions in Korea improved on the whole last year. Data from Statistics Korea shows nearly 26 million people were employed in 2014. That's up 533,000 from a year ago. And that is the largest annual growth in 12 years. The agency attributes the growth to greater job creation in the manufacturing sectors, on the back of increased exports, as well as in the health and social welfare sectors. The employment rate was just over 60%. That's up about 1 percentage point from 2013. The nation's jobless rate, however, edged up slightly to 3.5% last year. Korea added 422,000 new jobs in December. Korea's export prices dropped to a 7-year low last year due to falling global oil prices and the strengthening Korean won. The Bank of Korea says export prices went down 6% in 2014 from the previous year. A fall in export prices means exporters earn that much less when they're shipping out the same amount of products. But last year, import prices fell by a bigger margin than export prices, giving local exporters some leeway. Import prices dropped 7.5% last year from 2013. Now, it's a war against terrorism, not against Islam. That was the message French Prime Minister Manuel Valls had as lawmakers gathered for their first parliamentary session since last week's terror attacks in Paris. For more on this, we are joined by Eunice Kim at the News Centre. So, Eunice, Prime Minister Valls also proposed some tougher anti-terrorism measures.
That's right, Mark, and we will get to that in just a moment. But yes, it was an emotional session of the French Parliament on Wednesday as lawmakers observed a minute of silence for the victims before singing the national anthem. In a fiery speech, Prime Minister Manuel Valls said France was at war with terrorism, jihadism, and radical Islamism, but not Islam itself, going on to say that Islam that accepts the principles and values of the Republic was France's second religion. Now, on fighting terror, he called for tighter surveillance of imprisoned radicals as well as of the internet and social media as he tasked the Interior Ministry to come up with new security proposals. French police say as many as 6 terrorists could still be at large. They told the AP that they believe the weapons used in last week's attacks came from abroad. Police also identified a new suspect in Bulgaria, a Muslim Frenchman who has links to one of the Kouachi brothers. Reports say the 29-year-old told a hearing on Tuesday he was old friends with Sherif Kouachi but could not be held responsible for their actions.
And Eunice, tensions are also rising as the latest edition of Charlie Hebdo is set to hit newsstands later on this Wednesday. Hundreds of thousands of copies are going to be printed, and there have already been warnings about this cover, which is going to be highly controversial yet again, as it covers a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That new issue will hit newsstands in just a few hours when morning dawns in Paris and also in multiple countries around the world. And as we briefly showed you yesterday at the top of the show, this hour it does show a weeping Mohammed holding a sign that says, "I am Charlie Hebdo," with the phrase, "All is forgiven" above. Now, ahead of that release, there are already concerns and threats also being issued on militant websites, but also by one of Egypt's top Islamic authorities. Dal al-Ifta called the planned cover an unjustified provocation for millions of Muslims around the world and could spark a new wave of anger.
Meanwhile, the victims of the terror attacks there in Paris last week have been remembered in separate ceremonies, not only in Paris, but also in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and the ceremonies were held near simultaneously. Honored in Paris were the 3 police officers who were killed in the line of duty in last week's terror attacks, 2 at the offices of Charlie Hebdo and 1 policewoman, who was shot while directing traffic, you'll remember. French President Francois Hollande presented them, all 3 of them, with the Legion of Honor, saying they had died so that we could live in freedom. And also around the same time in Israel, thousands mourned the passing of 4 Jewish Frenchmen gunned down in an attack at a kosher supermarket on Friday. Their bodies were brought to Jerusalem to be buried. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu underlined that the murderers were not enemies of the Jewish people alone, but that of all humanity. Now, France is home to 550,000 Jews, but among them 7,000 are said to have emigrated to Israel last year amid concerns for their safety, Mark.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Eunice, for your reports, and we'll see you back again at noon.
See you then.
Said that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. Arirang News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. Now, Microsoft and its internet browser, Internet Explorer, have enjoyed a virtual monopoly in supplying a critical security feature for online shopping in Korea for more than 2 decades now, but that's about to come to an end because starting as early as March, shoppers on Korean websites will no longer have to install a Microsoft security program called ActiveX. Our Connie Kim reports.
Many would say it's been a long time coming, but online shoppers in Korea will soon be able to get things much more easily. For starters, the government will no longer require shoppers to install a Microsoft-developed authentication program just to buy something online, under a plan to be introduced as early as March. The ActiveX plugin, which only works on Internet Explorer, has been a must-have for shoppers making a purchase of over 300,000 won, roughly $275. The system was first implemented in 1999 to ensure safe online payments, but was often criticized for being slow and having poor web compatibility, limiting access to online shopping. Under proposed changes, it'll make online transaction procedures much simpler and let shoppers using other internet browsers, such as Firefox, Chrome, or Safari. The clunky online shopping requirement in Korea was even pointed out by President Park Geun-hye herself during her New Year's press conference on Monday.
액티브X와 같은 이런 낡은 규제에 안주한 결과 국내 소비자의 해외 직구는 폭발적으로 느는데 해외 소비자의 국내 역직구는 걸음마 수준입니다.
With ActiveX on the way out and shoppers having an easier time buying things from Korea-based websites, Korean online retailers hope the country will start turning its e-commerce deficit around. Foreign online purchases of Korean goods are expected at $27.7 million, or 1.5% of Koreans' online purchases of foreign goods last year. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Koreans are known to pay top dollar for imported groceries and food products, coffee and the like, even at double or triple the prices that people pay in other countries. But with FTAs in effect, some for years and years now, lots of people are wondering why exactly people in Korea have to pay so much. Kwon So-ah reports.
What do coffee, wine, and cheese in Korea have in common? They are all popular imports, and they are expensive. In fact, a recent survey of 13 major countries revealed that these three products are pulling the largest amount of money out of Korean consumers' pockets. According to Consumers Korea, a Starbucks Americano costs more than 4,000 won in Korea, or roughly $3.80. You'll get the same coffee indulgence for around $2.30 at a Starbucks in the United States. But it's not all that shocking, considering that most Korean brands sell their coffee for similar prices, as coffee consumption has skyrocketed in recent years. The industry is now estimated to be worth around $5.7 billion. Another product stands out too. A bottle of Montes Alpha premium wine from Chile sells for around $39 on Korean shelves, nearly double the price in Australia. And what goes well with the beverage? Cheese. But this too comes at a high price for Koreans. The Laughing Cow, a famous processed cheese product from France, can be bought in Korea for over $4, which is very expensive compared to what the French have to pay, a mere $1.30. The list goes on. 8 out of 42 imported products were found to be the most expensive in Korea, and 11 products were ranked second most expensive. This, despite Korea's efforts to conclude numerous free trade agreements in recent years. Consumers Korea points to the country's distribution system as the reason for the high prices and says that for the general public to benefit from FTAs, the system will need a revision. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2015 Asian Cup, where the Korean national football team found themselves in a bit of a pickle with Son Heung-min and two other starters out with the flu, and Vice Captain Lee Chung-young returned to Korea after injuring his ankle going into their second group stage match against Kuwait. But no worry, says Nam Tae-hee, who heads in the only goal of the match in the 35th minute, giving the Taeguk Warriors the 1-0 lead and the win, given the national team advancing to the quarterfinals. Despite the lack of offense for the second straight match, the defense continues to shut it down as they're set to face off against the host nation Australia on Saturday. Now, aside from Korea's 1-0 win over Kuwait on Tuesday, the other major sports news in the nation was reports of Kang Jong-ho agreeing to a major league deal with the Pittsburgh Pirates. But what's next for Korea's top shortstop? Now, despite reports that the 28-year-old have agreed to a 4-year deal worth $16 million plus an option for a 5th year, it's not guaranteed that he'll be a starting infielder for the Pirates just yet. And with the middle infield currently being occupied by Jordy Mercer at short and Neil Walker at second, Kang Jong-ho must prove himself to be a defensive player during spring camp in order to cement himself as a starter. Now, while Kang Jong-ho hopes to swing for the fences in the majors, Korea's Bae Sang-moon was swinging away at the Hyundai Tournament of Champions despite the ongoing issue with his military service. And it seemed like the off-the-field distractions were an issue with the 28-year-old as he went into the final round of the event tied for third, but struggled a bit in the front nine to finish with 18 under par overall, good for 6th place. Meanwhile, brilliant final round for American Patrick Reed, who came back to beat Jimmy Walker after a sudden death playoff hole to win the 2015 Hyundai Tournament of Champions. Now, while golf is one of the more popular hobby sports here in the nation, three-cushion is another popular sport. And after the latest world ranking, the popularity of the sport might grow even more. Now, 38-year-old Choi Sung-won, who became the first Korean to win the three-cushion world championship last year, became the first Korean to top the three-cushion world ranking as well, as he took over Eddie Merckx's spot for the #1 ranking. Meanwhile, Choi Sung-won is set to compete in the three-cushion Asian Championship from January 20th to the 22nd in Seoul. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Mild winter day is in store today, but lots of clouds will be hovering over the peninsula. And as we can see, rain clouds have formed and it has been dropping rain to the Jeju Island from this morning, and it is likely to continue throughout the day. So 5 to 30 millimeters are expected over in Jeju, which could linger till tomorrow morning. And other areas on the southern coastal regions could also see showers passing by during the day. But again, temperatures will be as mild as yesterday, as the high in Seoul will climb up to 6, while Daegu and Gwangju should peak at 9 and 8, and Busan will reach 10 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island will rise to 11, while Daejeon and Dokdo will be getting up to 7 later in the day. Now, up in Seoul, we'll see mix of rain and snow falling on Friday evening. Then the temperature will briefly drop on Saturday, but it seems like temperature will rebound again on the next day. Now, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. There are plenty more stories on our website, and we'll be back again at noon Korea time with our next newscast. So until then, goodbye.